at some point in their lives, typically being at age 12, had exposure to pornography. In 2011, the question really isn't, have you ever looked at porn? The question is really, to what degree do you have a struggle with it? Okay? Because I would dare say that none of you women are going to be marrying any man in this room or outside this place who has not at some point looked at pornography. And the question is, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I did. No. I shared this morning in class that the websites for porn websites on the internet are now up to 12% of all websites are porn sites. That's 4.2 million websites that are there. So it is, to a degree, a situation every man has to deal with. And so where are you at with that? And the better the accountability for us, and recognize we need it. If we're going to survive. And especially, one of the questions that talks about, how pervasive is this, and is there opportunity for healing and whatnot? For those that are in youth ministry and ministry settings, there's very little grace in our culture for anybody who is addicted and caught, in a sense, where this is out, on your computers or whatnot. There's countless stories that I've heard over the recent decades about folks that have lost their job and any opportunity to work in a children's or youth ministry arena if this is an issue for you. And you're caught doing it. There's a whole different deal if you're being treated and working through it, and you're doing it in a way that you're being proactive in trying to overcome that addiction or whatever stage of issue that it faces you. But it's a way to end your career if this is the direction that you're headed. So the sooner you get help and sooner you get accountability, the healthier you'll be in the long run.
Is there any creative ways that you could share with us to share this with our youth groups? A lot of us are in youth ministry or just working with kids on a daily basis. We don't talk about it. Are there any creative ways that we could do that?
Yeah, Dean Borgman, in his book, When Kumbaya is Not Enough, he has a chapter in there on the theological perspectives on sexuality. And he talks about us in our churches needing to have places where people can have conversation about sexuality. In our tendency, in my 13 years of working at Fifth, we chose the month of February was our, the love month, so to speak, with Valentine's Day, is to always, every February, address the topic of where we're at sexuality, our views of sexuality, our views of relationships. And so the creative kind of way, the thought that came is, what do healthy relationships look like? One of my leaders, who was a marketing guy, he was in charge of doing our publications for the things that we were doing. So in the church bulletin for this particular season's deals, he put the title of our series as The Keys to Great Sex. You imagine the responses we got from our congregation on that. It says, and many folks are going, can I come to it? But where things are intentionally trying to address this. And again, oftentimes in the church, you get this a little bit between money and sexuality are kind of the two taboos that we don't ever want to talk about. We do need to address them. And again, the church is criticized oftentimes for there's so much talk about money, but it's still never in an appropriate way about, what is God's place with that? And so we need to pay attention to it. Same thing with relationships. And looking at it as what do healthy relationships look at it and address it head on. And again, bring in experts, other folks that have had testimonies and issues with it and the effects of that. We had one of the sessions we had one of our leaders was a nurse, and she brought in one of her friends who was a doctor that saw many women who had sexually transmitted diseases. And she brought photographs. That'll wake you up a bit in terms of what deviancies, the poor direction can go for you in terms of unhealthiness. And so then we spun into what does healthy relationships look like? There's a reason why God designed us for one man, one woman. And again, the effects of that is a beautiful thing if done in the right context.
I had a disappointing experience in my church about a year ago. And from the standpoint of youth ministry or pastoral ministry, I think part of the issue is also really confronting parents and educating them. My pastor did a series on sexuality, and it was not edgy. it was straightforward, but he wasn't pushing the envelope apart from the fact that he was preaching a series on sex. There were numbers of middle school parents who, after the first sermon, asked that their 5th and 6th graders be dismissed from the service because the conversation was too explicit. And I wanted to tear my hair out because the idea that these 5th and 6th graders were naive is just plain stupid. Okay? Not to mention the fact that what in the world is the message to those middle schoolers about sexuality from a Christian vantage point when you treat it as something that is too dangerous or too uncomfortable to have a frank conversation about. And I don't know what happened with those parents, whether there was any follow-up from the youth minister and the pastor with them about what's going on. But, man, in this day and age, that was just a, frankly, bizarre response. And I suspect that it's not unusual. And so part of your task, if you go into ministry, I think, is to not just deal with kids around it, but to confront parents as to how are you addressing this.
Yeah, we talked this morning about this very fact that our kids know far more than we give them credit for. And oftentimes it's misinformation. And so the need is to kind of help parents to engage in that conversation with their kids. And so, again, one of the things we did in the February sessions, and we did this both with high school and middle school, is we gave them homework assignments to go home with, to have a question. We want you to have this conversation with your parents about these questions. And, again, it stirred the pot a little bit with folks. And, again, we were clear, make sure that the senior pastor, your youth council folks who are supervising with you, they know what you're addressing and what you're intending to do. So it's not just you doing it. This is something that's been a decision of a body of folks that have decided we're going to address this in an appropriate way.
This is kind of going back to what you guys were talking about earlier about just like helping, like that it needs to be people helping each other out in like a relationship or whatever. Can you speak to like specific ways that like a significant other could help, like in and be open, like being open-minded? Like, is it just, you know, asking how are you doing? Like, I don't know if there's like specific ways that someone could be helpful.
I think, first of all, operating from a position of encouragement as opposed to critique. Okay. Also being explicit. I don't mean, you know, sexually explicit, but being very clear, asking very precise questions. How are you doing with the porn thing? It's probably not specific enough. Because it's easy to say, oh, I'm doing pretty good. Okay. Have you looked at porn today? It's a very different kind of question. Okay. And, you know, people who are in a secret life find all kinds of ways to conceal that. And so it's important to kindly, lovingly put them in a position of having to deal very directly with the issue. Okay. I'm curious, how many of you have laptops? Okay. How many of you have filtering software installed on your laptop to block pornography sites? Quarter. Okay. How many of you have cable television access in your families of origin or where you are right now? How many of you have free, unfettered access to all of the adult channels? Okay.
What was that?
I think it's nuts to have a computer and not have decent filtering, blocking software installed. Because otherwise, I think it's a tall order, day after day, week after week, month after month. I mean, quite honestly, if I had all the X-rated videos on my cable that I could just push a button, it was free and didn't show up on my bill, I don't know over the long haul whether I would resist that forever. Okay? The fact that it costs $15 right now is sufficient deterrent.